Welcome.
Thank you.
Today we're going to talk about a very interesting topic that's about the sustainability and bringing different stakeholders together to create a pragmatic, sustainable future. I think this this topic is related to everyone, including policymakers, investors, and everyone in the environment. And recently we have had lots of extreme weather around the world. We've seen these rivers diminishing. We've seen extreme weather patterns, either flooding or drought. This is very difficult in the current economic environment and other geopolitical challenges. So let me ask you, Sid, first, that sustainability is a word that has appeared many times in government, corporate, investment visions. People talk about sustainability, why it has become more and more important for everyone.
Very important question. And I think as the UN Secretary General recently said at the 77th United Nations General Assembly, and he said, and I quote, he says, "Our world is in peril and paralyzed. We cannot go on like this," end of quote. In a sense, it encapsulates what we are confronting today. We are confronted by four major crises: a COVID pandemic crisis, which is a health crisis. We are confronted by a climate crisis which actually poses an existential threat. We are confronted by a crisis of inequality, which actually started to become even more apparent after the arrival of the pandemic. And then we are confronted by what I would call a fuel, food, and energy crisis, which is all coming together. So in a sense, the world for the first time is seeing a multiplicity of crises. And the only solution out of this is what the UN member states all agreed to, is the Sustainable Development Goals, the 2030 agenda. That is the North Star. That is the compass to which we all have to reconfigure and move in that direction. And therefore, in order to do that, the aspect of sustainability therefore becomes critical to this. There is space for everybody. This needs an all of government, all of society, all of business, more and more academia, think tanks, all coming together, because this is not just the future of human development, it's the future of our entire humanity. Over to you.
Right, thank you. 马主席，我在一些商业的聚会上面，其实见过您那时候是以国内非常有影响力。
I met you during a business gathering. You were an influential entrepreneur in China back then, and you've been steering the China Merchants Bank for so many years, and you were widely known by the Chinese entrepreneurs. As a member of the UNDP SDG Impact Steering Group and Executive Chairman of China Alliance of Social Value Investment, you must have a lot of insight into sustainable development. So what's the biggest challenge facing the SDG by United Nations currently? The UN SDG was formulated in 2015. Now it's 2022. 50% of the time has elapsed, but I think the agenda was severely stonewalled. Well, the SDG has three goals. One is equality, economic prosperity, and environmental protection. I think these three pillars have been challenged severely. We're talking about social equality. As a result of the pandemic, the extreme poverty rate rose for the very first time in the past 20 years. Well, the pandemic has taken the life of 15 million people around the world. So poverty and health, well, probably personal challenges for humanity. The climate issue, the flood last year, and the extreme high temperature this year. Well, I think in American and European countries, we face some unprecedented high temperature in the past 100 years. Some of the rivers have dried up, and in China, many provinces face severe high temperature. Well, I started to understand what do I mean by the barbecue model of the temperature. Well, in Sichuan, 80% of the electricity is generated by hydropower. So because of the droughts, many factories have to close. Apart from all these the previous mentioned challenges, we still have geopolitical tension. The World Bank and IMF have tuned down their economic forecast for the GDP growth for the world this year. I believe that all the three pillars of the UN SDGs have been challenged severely. Well, the most important task for us to do right now, or facing us right now, is to find the way forward toward the sustainable goal. That's the biggest challenge we're facing. Thank you. Actually, I have a follow-up question. You have a very strong financial background. Right now, everybody has been affected by what is known as the shortage of fund and investment. In 2012, the United Nations released a report saying that it will take about $42 trillion to realize the UN SDG. So the question is, what are we supposed to get these funding? Well, in order to promote the sustainable development, the most practical and effective measure is to encourage the social financial resources to come to the SDG. A lot of this funding is going into the SDG is called the sustainable funding. So we must try our very best to promote the development of sustainable finance. In 2015, the funding gap is $3.9 trillion for developing countries. Well, actually, the real gap is $2.5 trillion if we set aside the social fundings as well as the government fundings. But during the pandemic, because of the lack of the fundings, now the gap is $4.4 trillion, and the gap is getting wider and wider. There's no government fundings as well as charity fundings that can really make up for that gap. We have to promote sustainable financing. We start to realize that only sustainable financing can help us to address the problem or fix the problem. As I said, that responsible impact investment. So the difference between this investment and ordinary commercial investment is that actually we found that many social and economic problems are generated by economic activities. Well, let's say if we place both emphasis on economic benefit as well as on social and economic benefit in making every economic and investment decision, that will help us to mitigate a lot of problems. When we start to make any investment decisions, we should take into consideration the social and environmental benefit. It's an ideal and lofty slogan, but as long as we follow that line, we will reduce the problem we're facing gradually. This is the only way out. The ESG investment or impact investment, whatever the investment it is, we must take the initiative. We can't sit there passively and wait for the problems to come to us. We need to confront the problems and challenges out of our own initiative. I believe that these measures will be effective. By 2021, the ESG investment has exceeded $3.5 billion US. The impact investment, the concept of impact investment was generated in 2007. So, while impact investment means on one hand we can get economic benefit, on the other hand, there's quantifiable social benefit involved in this investment decision. In China, we have the concept of green funding and preferential funding. Well, these investments will help to address the real problem in our society. Thank you very much. Thank you. We'll continue the topic on sustainable financing.
There's a gap hole in the money that is needed in to achieve UN's sustainability targets. 4.2 or $4.4 trillion is the money in the UN Sustainable Report in 2021. I mean, Mr. Ma says that gap is enlarging from 3 trillion now to 4 trillion and is expected to even expand more in the future. But the positive thing is that Mr. Ma also noticed that more and more stakeholders are injecting investment into this. We've seen substantial growth in this. What's your observation?
Absolutely. And you see, the thing is that these are opportunities, and that is why the term sustainability becomes so crucial to this entire conversation. In the larger aspects of human development, our progress, 4 trillion is nothing. It is really about looking at a convergence of public-private partnerships, of better impact investing, of developing low-carbon economies. I think the future transition that we now need to see, what is termed as the fourth industrial revolution, is here. And it will need the might of not just the developed world, but the developing countries in order to come together with one common perspective. It is not the money itself, it is our political will, our ambition in terms of coming together to advance this. And yes, there is enough of avenues available through which resources can be garnered in and to look at, and that therefore the term sustainability becomes, where does the return of investment therefore go? How will that return of investment be measured? All those are the things that will need. So what I'm hoping that as we advance to the 2030 agenda, and that is precisely the discussions which are happening right now at the UN General Assembly, how do we do the financing? How do we do the climate financing, where we need about $100 billion, in particular for the developing countries in order to lower their carbon dioxide footprint. So the potential to harness these resources are there. I think where we are missing the boat, is the Secretary General reminding everybody, is the political will, the desire to see that sort of global change. But increasingly, I find many more companies are embracing the idea of environmental sustainability and governance issues. That is becoming even more clear. Their social responsibilities in that, because ultimately, even for corporations, if you don't have human beings with disposable income, how will they be able to buy and sell? It comes down to very basic economics. And those basic economics now need to be given relevance. The relevance will be when we start looking at the right public policies, the political will, and new dynamic partnerships to be forged in order to advance the sustainable development goals. And I think if we can keep the focus on the SDGs, I think that itself will allow us to all converge towards advancing this. Over to you.
Thank you. 马主席，相信您刚才听到了，Chatterjee 先生说到了在推动可持续金融、推动可持续发展方面
Mr. Ma,
具体的这个需要的投资的具体的这个数哈，并不是最大的问题。
Chatterjee has just said that well, the money is not the biggest problem for the SDG. The biggest issue is the political will and political power. But investors should pay both attention to economic return as well as social benefit. Well, how do we suppose to encourage the government to muster up greater political will, promote investors to accept the ideal of SDG and take active actions? I'd agree with what he said, indeed. Well, money is important, of course, but we have a clear picture of the severe situation in the current social economic development landscape. If we don't understand what our humanity is fighting in the future, we will not be able to develop the political will to encourage the resources to come in to the area of SDG. This is something the government, the society, and every human being should take into consideration. The Chinese government is committed to sustainable development. The Chinese President Xi Jinping has made a commitment on carbon peak and carbon neutrality to the international society in 2020. Last February, President Xi Jinping announced that we lift 100 million Chinese people out of absolute poverty, contributing to 70% of the poverty alleviation effort in the world. 2012 to 2019, from 2012 to 2020, China has launched a clean climate initiative, reducing the carbon emission equivalent to 2 billion tons of coal. Well, actually, China has already taken action. Because we are all concerned about the future of humanity. And also, these actions are taken out of the sense of responsibilities by corporations toward the society. And the government has taken the carbon emission reduction as a quantifiable target in the 14th five-year plan. The common prosperity, the rural area revival, as well as the carbon peak and carbon neutrality targets are some of the hot agenda in China. And I believe that the realization of these above-mentioned goals will be conducive to the realization of SDG. Thank you. Mr. Ma, one more follow-up question. What you've just told us that the Chinese government has taken quite a number of measures toward that positive goal. Actually, we saved up 2.4 billion tons of coal, and the actual consumption is only 2.2 billion tons. So the question is, what you understand toward the SDG, and what do we need to do in the future? No poverty, no starvation, and healthy well-being. I believe that China has contributed a lot in these three areas. Well, I just told you that we've lifted 100 million people out of poverty, and we are resorting to rural revival as strategies to keep these people out of poverty, absolute poverty.
There is a so-called Human Development Index, and this is launched maybe decades ago. So back to the year 2019 and 2020, it is the first time for it to be applied. About 90% of all the countries in the world have seen the reduction of the index on various degrees, because on health, education, and life, this indicator has demonstrated comprehensive and extensive reduction of the numbers, to the only exception of China. China is the only bright spot or rising star in this regard. So this is clear testimony to China's contribution. Talking about 2030 and 2060 goal, and China is actually discharging a lot of the wastes that should be curtailed. That's why we have raised the requirement and also this target, albeit a very challenging one, still within reach of accomplishment. Not only it is an issue related to efficiency and the reduction of waste, but rather it is an unprecedented revolution of the energy sector, and has become a useful tool for us to push ahead with the greater transformation of the human livelihood. Because in nature, there are a lot of new things that should be coming on the board for the reduction of emission, and also it will significantly change the way in which we produce, we interact, and also we live the world. This is indeed a great transformation. For such a big country like China, if this becomes possible, that will be a very big contributor to the world. Looking ahead into the future, it is not something that is relevant to what we are living now, but rather it will be delivering its impact over the next decade or two. You know, with the 14th five-year plan and also with the medium long-term goal, we have to bear in mind the importance of common prosperity. The common prosperity is intended to achieve the reduction of poverty and equality for all human beings. We have also proposed such concepts as two circulations, high-speed growth, and so on and so forth, as a part of our contributions to the world. So it is fair to say that China will be a responsible contributor to this end in the future further.
You've had extensive experience in developing countries. Can you give us an example on a best demonstration of sustainability?
Perhaps I'll start with Beijing itself. And if you look at air quality in Beijing not too long ago, you know, how the country in a way has transformed, how Beijing, the capital, has transformed its air quality is pretty remarkable. And I think I would say that, 9 years ago, after the toxic smog in China's capital had so much of negative health effects. And today that extraordinary progress has been because of a sustainable response to it. It has been able to trim down coal-fired plants. It's been able to replace it with more renewable energy and gas. The distribution system has improved exponentially. I'm a runner. I run every Saturday. I do a half marathon. And most days when I look at the AQI level before I head out, you know, I find the air is clear. Keep in mind, 7 million people die every year just because of air pollution. I believe Beijing's example could very easily be replicated in many other parts of the world, given the size of the capital and the population that lives within and around Beijing. And I think this is where I would commend it for a great example of sustainability. Back to you.
Right. Well, in my understanding, if I can share something, I just reported the Beijing Services Trade Expo in the Shougang Park, which is called the Capital Mill. It was one of China's largest steel mill back in the 90s and 2000. It was moved out of Beijing to reduce air pollution pressure on the capital before the Olympic Games. But now it's transformed into a service-oriented, technology-oriented park, a complex with lots of technology upgrades. There we see a dedicated lanes to test automobiles with self-driving. We've seen metaverse parks being built there to test the latest technology. So there's a great shipments from an industry manufacturing-based economy to a more service-based economy. So I think that's also partly explains the air quality improvement in Beijing and improvement of your running experience in the capital city. So let me continue. In your knowledge, what efforts have China made in reaching the 30-60 carbon peaking and neutrality goals?
First of all, I want to commend President Xi Jinping for having made that commitment of China achieving carbon peaking by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060. I think it is clear, the climate report is clear, as the Secretary General has said, that we are on a climate red alert. And the recent FOCAC conference, for example, the Forum for China-Africa Cooperation, also an announcement was made by President Xi that there will be more push towards low carbon economic development across with their partners in the other parts of the developing world. So I believe that these are the efforts that we need to make. We as the United Nations system will bring to bear the best guidance, the best technical assistance, the best knowledge that we can harness as we work with our government counterparts to advance the carbon peaking agenda. Already we are seeing the aspects of renewable energy that has now become much more emphatic in the Chinese economy. We are seeing a bigger push towards major carbon emitting industry, looking at how to reverse that and how to go into more of the renewable space. So I see plenty of opportunities. But this again, the fact that there was political will, there was a direction given by your head of state, I believe that allows everybody to come together in order to follow through on that. Very evident also in the 14th five-year plan, where this has been very clearly articulated on what we want to do. So as the UN system, we remain fully committed to ensuring China's success in this in carbon peaking by 2030. And I hope we can do it even before 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality even before 2060. I hope we can achieve it by 2050, because again, what China does will have implications for many other parts of the developing world, because today knowledge is what I can share with other parts of our South-South cooperation. And I think there are plenty of best practices here that we can take to other parts of the developing world, particularly those which are still struggling with the challenges of fossil fuels. And that is a reality we have to look at. How do we transition out of fossil fuel? It can't just happen overnight. There are many countries whose economies will collapse. That is why we talk about a just transition out of fossil fuel. And I believe it's possible. In my view, I'm quite confident of seeing China achieving carbon peaking well before 2030. Some of the measures already, which I see in the public policy space, I meet a lot of industry captains, both from the polluting industry and the non-polluting industry. Everybody's talking about how do we re-engineer, how do we repurpose, how do we reinvent, how do we reignite the whole move push towards carbon peaking. And frankly, when you get an orchestra that comes together around this, when leadership of the corporate world, leadership in government, leadership across civil society, and plus us as the UN family that works in China, we are quite confident that 2030 is not just within reach, but perhaps we should be able to do it a few years before that. Over to you.
Right. Let me follow up a little bit, because you talk about China's experiences as being quite successful. How can China experiences be used in other countries, especially developing countries?
Well, precisely this, the development of low carbon economy, moving in more into solar energy, more into renewable energy, the windmills that we have seen, which are sprouting up all across Africa. I believe China's afforestation program, where it has started to green more and more, trees are being planted. I think China currently has the record of the number of trees that have been planted all across the country. So in Inner Mongolia and all these places. Now, these are easy experiences to share. And how do we make sure that it can be sustained? It's not just going and planting those trees. It is also making sure those trees come to a level of maturity when they can be, independent of care. So I think that there are many areas, particularly in the climate space, particularly in the afforestation space, particularly in the renewable energy space, that could be shared. But the other part is technology and innovation. Again, this is another space which will allow many countries to leapfrog. So, Mr. Ma talked about China's removing, people out of poverty. Yes, in the last 40 years, 4 decades, over 750 million people have been lifted out of poverty. Now, what we need to make sure is those lessons, how do we share that with the global South who are still struggling with it? And yesterday, in fact, we had a meeting with the Horn of Africa ambassadors, and you know that the Horn of Africa is experiencing one of its worst droughts. I've served a major part of my career in Africa. I've served in Somalia, I've served in Sudan, in South Sudan, in Kenya, and they're seeing one of the worst ever droughts. Nearly 25 million people are at the risk of starvation there. And the discussion we had with the Chinese government and with the Horn of Africa ambassadors is, how do we bring to bear China's own experiences, which has also seen its share of hunger and malnutrition, but today, with a population of nearly 1.4 billion, has become quite food secure. What are those lessons that we could be sharing with African countries in terms of technology, in terms of the innovation, in terms of the big data, in terms of best practices, so that they can also become food secure? And why am I saying this? China has 9% of the world's arable land. Africa has 60% of the world's arable land. Africa should have been the breadbasket for the rest of the world, but today Africa imports $100 billion worth of food into its economy, whereas it should be a net exporter of food. It should be completely food self-sufficient. And if you are food self-sufficient, if you've achieved food security, you end poverty. Which, if you see the interplay between SDG 1 and SDG 2, had it not been for SDG 2 of achieving a level of food security, China would not have been able to lift 750 million people out of poverty. So there is an interplay between that. Can we now work together? And that is the discussion we have. How can we work together with the public sector, with the private sector, with academia, to come together and look at the Horn of Africa, not just as a case of charity, but to look at how do we build the system to be not just food secure, but to unlock the $1 trillion opportunity in business, in the food area, in the agribusiness area in Africa by 2030, next 8 years. So I see plenty of opportunities here to look at the United Nations, China, Africa, many other, the European Union, all coming together to deal with a major crisis that Africa is now confronting, which is of food insecurity. Back to you.
Sid, I didn't interrupt, but I wanted to ask, did you say 60% of arable land of the world
is in
Africa?
Yes.
60?
60%,
like 60?
60.
Wow. So the potential is huge, considering China only had 9%.
You know, if I'm an investor, Mr. Ma, if I had the kind of resources, I would invest in agriculture in Africa. And I'll tell you why. Today, Africa's population is 1.25 billion. By 2050, Africa's population will be 2.5 billion. 2050. By 2050, the world's population will be over 9 billion, touching 10 billion. If you want a reliable source of a return of investment, the agribusiness space is going to be the biggest space. The second thing, Africa also has the youngest population in the world. The median age of Africa is 18. When there'll be 2.5 billion by 2050, they will have 900 million young people. They will have disposable income if they are fed, if they have the agricultural resources, if the whole value chain is built up, if they're employed. The biggest challenge in Africa right now is the challenge of unemployment. 10 to 12 million young Africans are looking for work every 1 year. Every year, 10 to 12. And this is going to be the pattern over the next 10, 15 years. Imagine if we could create a value proposition in the entire agriculture space, it is going to absorb a large number of young people into employment. This is exactly what happened in China. That a large number of people were able to get employed, they were able to be productive in terms of food production. And that is going to make a huge difference, because not only does Africa feed itself, but it is in a potential to feed the world, given the population that will be there. And therefore, this is a good time for industry to come together, work with smallholder farmers, work with governments to look at how do we rearrange the agribusiness ecosystem and turn it into a low carbon agribusiness ecosystem. I believe the opportunities are immense there. And yesterday, from the discussion that came out, it's in the news today, you will find it there. It was very productive. We had academia, we had the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, DG Wupang from the Director General for Africa was there. A lot of partners came around, American chambers of commerce, British chambers of commerce. They all see an enormous opportunity of us coming together, of transforming food systems. China's experience here is going to be absolutely critical. Back to you.
Thank you. 马主席，那我们就根据谢先生刚刚给我们提供那些很有趣的、很关键的
Mr. Ma, so according to this key information and the messages from Mr. Siddhar Chatterjee, if Africa is home to about 60% of the arable land, but the unemployment rate is up to about 20 to 30% for the young people in Africa. So Mr. UN coordinator is of the view that the experiences of China will be positive to its growth in Africa, especially for food security and also for the reduction of poverty and also to achieve our carbon emission target. So what's your take on that?
这个常云先生讲到非洲的问题啊。
Just Mr. Chatterjee has mentioned about what happened in Africa, especially hunger, starvation, poverty, and climate change. I think that he has been quite thorough in making references to a lot of figures and statistics in Africa, and he is of the view of reinforcing our investment in Africa. The key is to deliver more education so that young people there will become strong driving forces of the labor market. Actually, it is even more so in the world. Apart from the pandemic, we have also seen the geological conflicts at the same time. Energy, food crisis are all really keenly felt so far. And also we have seen unprecedented inflation. It is also believed that the inflation rate of the whole world will be up to about 6.7% this year. But considering the inflation rate is staying somewhere between 2.9%, but for the states, the high valuation of the US dollars actually has triggered a lot of serious problems of the whole world. So given this context, what should be the way out to balance economic growth, and the way in which we deal with climate change becomes a critical issue. Of course, in the absence of energy, you will feel quite cold in winter, and without bread, you will suffer from starvation. So talking about energy issues will not solve the problem of food. But without food, without the proper arrangement of food, but if you let go of those issues of climate change, in the future, there will never be such a day when you are going to see proper arrangement of this issue at the right moment. So I think we have to correct our understandings about these two factors. I think if you want to solve the current issues related to our economy, being energy, food, inflation, and so on and so forth, each and every economic measure and activity has to bear in mind the long-term goal. In other words, you have to ensure that the economic benefit and the social impact will have to be put on one scale. So this is how I feel about this issue, especially the critical point for the government at all levels in the world.
If you address the problem in front of you, you're not going to get away with it. But if you just address the short-term problems without looking into the future, you'll suffer in the long run. Secondly, we might face a lot of contradictions at the moment. It also applies to the domestic situation. China is a developing country. We need to develop our economy. There's asymmetry between economic peak and carbon peak. It is also a problem for us. We have relied on innovation and technological revolution to strike a balance between the short-term economic development and a long-term carbon emission target. Innovation is the only way out. We need a technological breakthrough. We need a paradigm shift in the production model. And also we need a sort of revolution in our lifestyle. Carbon emission reduction requires low consumption, low emission, and low carbon lifestyle. It will become a mainstay in the society. These are some of the factors that our policymakers must take into consideration. By talking about the carbon emission reduction and sustainable development, it is a global issue. It is a challenge for the entire world. We would love to reach consensus on these issues. Low carbon technologies requires the investment and funding from all over the world. Stanford has established a new research institute comprising of more than 300 professors. Well, the research institute is dedicated to the carbon emission reduction technology. In China, we have the Belt and Road Initiative. We would love to pull the global resources together and fix the problems facing the entire humanity. I believe that this is something that needs to be considered by all the policymakers around the world. Thank you, Mr. Mao.
You just mentioned the long-term and short-term challenges that global policymakers are dealing. They're on one hand dealing with the current energy, food inflation crisis, and on the other hand, they're dealing with frequent extreme weather patterns. They have to do both, but how do they balance their efforts? They're just limited resources, limited energy, limited money. How do they balance?
You know, we are currently experiencing worldwide economic shocks, you know, from the COVID-19 pandemic, a worsening climate crisis, new threats to food and energy security. We have seen that global progress on all the 17 sustainable development goals have basically stalled. So what we need to be doing is, in these remaining years of this decade of action, just 8 years left, and all sectors of society, including governments, private sector, civil society, and individuals, need to mobilize to confront these challenges and realize the promise of the 2030 agenda of the sustainable development, so long as we keep that in our focus. And we have credible and tested ESG, you know, environmental, social, and governance and sustainable finance approaches. They are there and can support this. And adopting approaches in tandem with the targets set by the SDGs can be a driver for innovation and, I would say, long-term value for both business and for society. So I would just say in conclusion that the UN and China is fully committed to supporting these efforts to allow further consensus in this area. And allow me to just conclude with a quote from President Xi Jinping, when he says that, and I quote, "By setting sail together, we could ride the wind, break the waves, brave the journey of 10,000 miles. And this itself captures what we can do if we are to collaborate. And this is why the renewed push by the Secretary General, renewed push by many member states on the importance of multilateralism, on importance of the United Nations system to give velocity to those very ambitions that the Sustainable Development Goals have put in front of us. I believe that once that feeling of collectiveness comes into play, everything will fall into place. And that is why I feel that the energy and determination that we need to keep multilateralism going is going to be absolutely crucial. I think with that final quote which I made, we would be able to overcome most of the challenges we currently confront. Over to you.
All right. Sid, Mr. Ma also just mentioned that developing countries needs to focus on development. It's their first priority, and development in many occasions means industrialization. In the Glasgow climate deal, developing economies, including India, at the last minute requested more time for carbon reduction goals, citing the need for their own industrialization. So industrialization for the developing world is vital to lift millions out of poverty. It's the core of their development. But industrialization often means more carbon footprint. What's the solution?
Well, I think there is more technology available than was available 40 years ago. And that is why China's own economic growth and other parts of the world was reinforced by coal. But that transition has already started to happen. And that's why I'm talking about a just transition. But if you remember in the meeting that John Kerry had with your climate envoy in Shanghai, something he said very importantly. He said that the low carbon economic growth, the green revolution, will rival the industrial revolution of the past. So I believe there is already a fair confluence of technology and innovation already available. How do we best share this information and knowledge with other developing countries which are wanting to lift people out of poverty, which are wanting to, leapfrog their economies? It is not a gradual progress. It is about leapfrogging it. I believe right now we are at that inflection point with the knowledge already available to allow that to happen. So I don't see that as a challenge. I actually see this as an opportunity for us to look at these experiences and move the needle forward. China is not an island. It is surrounded by many countries. Now, if they are polluting countries like the storms that we saw last year, if you recall the number of dust storms we experienced in Beijing, that had got nothing to do with Beijing, but it was coming from surrounding countries. What does it mean? More afforestation, planting of more trees, making sure that the deserts are turned into more greener pastures so that they can become arable. The opportunities are there. And that is why the collective enterprise of multilateralism therefore needs to be reinforced and re-energized in every way today. Over to you.
Thank you so much for insights. 马先生，我们可能快到我们这一次这个讨论的
Mr. Ma, we're about to wrap up this discussion. You and me were both at the Beyond Expo, the first Beyond Expo in Macau. Well, this time the Expo is held in the metaverse, so bringing us a whole new experience. You just told us that technological innovation can be the new impetus for economic development. So can you tell us how can the technological development or innovation drive economic development? Yes, we both attended the first Beyond Expo held in Macau. Due to the pandemic, the Expo is now moved into the metaverse. I think it's quite a good idea to hold the Beyond Expo in the metaverse. Well, the participants can interact with each other, can visit the stands, can get information about other exhibitors and participants. That's a pretty interesting idea. I think the Expo itself is a demonstration of how the technology can help in economic development. As I said, sustainable development is a kind of social transformation and technological revolution. Well, we're using renewable energies to replace fossil fuel. It is a revolution by itself. As technology is moving ahead, it will have a greater influence on the society. As the head of the China Merchants Bank, I financially supported a lot of photovoltaic companies. Due to the lack of technologies, all of these companies failed. leaving us a lot of non-performing loans. But due to the technological development later on, China is probably the biggest photovoltaic manufacturer in the world. They told me that Mr. Ma, all these loans are not given in vain, because all these financial support generated the development or supported the technological development at this front. Currently, our 3060 fund is doing a project in the Inner Mongolia, which can be a demonstration project in the United Nations. In the Inner Mongolia, there is some open air coal mines. Most of these mining machines using diesels with heavy emission of carbon dioxide. Well, in the past, we have tried to use electricity to power these machines, but these electricity was generated by diesel. So we're still polluting. We were still polluting the environment. But right now, we are using the energy storage technology, such as the wind power, solar power, to power up these mining machines and mining trucks. We use batteries to power these mining trucks. We need to overhaul the power structure and the entire structure of the mining trucks, and we also need to set up the battery station where the batteries can be replaced. And we also need to develop a digital system to control the entire system. I believe that this is a technological revolution over the entire industrial chain to support the reduction of carbon emission. There are numerous examples like that in China. Back to the rural area, I just told you that there is a national strategy to revive the rural economy. In the rural area, there is one big problem, that is how to market the local produce. If you can't market your local produce, they just go rotten in the field. Now we're using the internet to help these growers to sell their products. We have very sophisticated transportation infrastructures across the entire country. We got road and railroads to connect even the remotest villages in the rural areas, to help those plant growers to sell the products over the internet. As he said, that as Chatterjee said, that the developed economies have already emitted a lot of carbon dioxide into the climate. Yeah, that's right. But time is short. We have to rely on technological innovation to change the production model and pattern and fulfill our mission within a relatively short period of time. But looking into the future, we must rely on continuous technological revolution and innovation and a paradigm shift to realize the sustainable development goal. Thank you.
Now, friends, we are approaching the end of this very special coverage on CGTN on the Beyond International Expo. We touched on a number of key topics. Sustainability is more about political will than the money invested, and China has attached a great importance to sustainable development, as indicated by some hard data, as Sid and Mr. Ma tell us, in terms of renewable wind and solar energy installment, policy impetus, carbon reduction. That involves technology upgrading, application, and change of lifestyle, and even the way how we people think. Sid told us that Africa has huge potential. It has lots of arable land and large young population, but need investment and sustainable development patterns. Well, so as they mentioned, sustainable development is more about political will then money invested. So where there's a will, there's a way. A journey of 10,000 miles starts from a single step. So please stay tuned for more CityTune coverage on forums of Beyond International Expo. Friends, see you. 谢谢两位，谢谢。
陈教授你好。
你好，我上来了。
Everyone, welcome to this session, ESG, how businesses are tackling global challenges. I'm Li Zengxin, Deputy Manager of Caixin Media. So the term ESG, environment, social, and governance appeared as early as in 2004, and now as a well-known concept. The world's leading investment managers say 1/3 of their assets, or $35 trillion, are thin with ESG perspective. But in the meantime, it's not without controversies from the concept itself and practical issues. As the journal Economist suggests, maybe we should focus on one of the three letters. The other keywords here are, global challenges. We've seen plenty of them today, how business could deal with them, help tackle them through ESG. So today, we have the best speakers to try to answer these questions. They are Ms. Ma Qing, Executive Vice President, Head of People and Organization, Sustainability Lead, Siemens Greater China. Welcome. So Qing joined Siemens in 1997 and has been Executive Vice President and People and Organization Development Director since 2010. Since last year, she was also lead of sustainability, responsible for facilitating the implementation of Siemens Global Sustainability Framework, DEGREE, in China. DEGREE stands for decarbonization, ethics, governance, resource efficiency, equality, and employability. And then Professor Chen Long is Alibaba's strategy planning president and sustainability steering committee chair. Welcome. So he is responsible for Alibaba's future strategy development, as well as ESG strategy and operations. On the academic side, he currently serves as the president of Luohan Academy, the open research platform initiated by Alibaba, and a host of world-class social scientists, including 7 Nobel Prize laureates. So welcome to you both. So without further ado, we just jump into the discussion. The first question is to both of you. In your view, why we need ESG? What are the key elements of ESG and how ESG could help? Maybe we start with Qing.
Thank you, Mr. Li. Very good question. Well, I mean, the latest event or incident give us quite a lot of call for action or reminders how ESG is becoming really a pressing topic, because we need to really think deeply how we safeguard the planet, the only planet that we are living. I think the pandemic and also the recent extreme weather in Sichuan, we all see how that impacts our life and the society as a whole. So I think it's really the time to make ESG or sustainability even more important for the well-being of the society and also the continuity and resilience of the businesses. And that's you know, even ESG is not something new. Previously, it is more, you know, many companies focus more on the compliance requirements, but now it has been accelerated and really getting increasingly integrated into business. The question is how we can really help, as what you are also addressing. In Siemens, sustainability is a topic that guided by, you nicely already described, the GREY framework, which really brought the ESG commitment to the next level. So the six character, you know, with also very, very dedicated KPIs in decarbonization, ethic, governance, resources, efficiency, and equity and employability. So ESG will help us really, you know, generate long-lasting value for the company, and taking the environment as example, you know, the big E as example. In Siemens, we focus really decarbonization and resources efficiency. Last year, industry, you know, 2020, you all know that industry sector in China only contributed 36% of total CO2 emissions. And we, of course, as the leading industry companies, we want to be the role model with our own commitment to be the net zero in operations by 2030, and also in supply chain by 2050. And of course, at the same time, we support many industry customers and our partners on their carbon neutrality, you know, journey via our holistic portfolios and industry know-how. So we really want to take this, take our technology roadmaps to implementation to a full life cycle, full life green transformations.
Yeah, great. So we could talk about Siemens specifically more later, but Professor Chen.
Yes, I think we all agree that climate change and inequality are two of the top challenges globally. So companies, especially technology companies, should try to alleviate rather than enhance this kind of challenges. I think the nature of ESG is to value a company from the stakeholders' point of view. So it really weights the contribution of company from all stakeholders, and because these are the key challenges, then they become the yardstick for how valuable a company is. So what is great about ESG is that we have now established a set of principles and standards to measure their company's contributions to the environment, to alleviate social challenges and its own governance. And they are increasingly becoming from voluntary to obligatory. And so that's the nature of this. And nowadays, and the reason why for public companies, in addition to their the financial report, they need to have ESG report that really states how important it is for companies. Nowadays, companies, it's not just that they have to perform well financially. Equally important, they have to perform well on their contribution to environment, to social challenges, and their own governance. I think so that without the corporation's contribution, there's no hope that those challenges can be elevated at the scale. So I think and it's out of the obligation, out of their responsibility. They should do this.
Yeah. So both speakers say that there are the challenges and ESG is the only way out. So my next question is on fighting climate change. You know, as you said, most of the countries right now, they have their own strategies, their blueprint, their plans, regulations, tools to reduce carbon footprint since the Paris Agreement. China has this carbon peak and carbon neutral goals in 2030 and 60. So how can businesses adjust to deal with this? Like standards, Professor Chen just said, codes, rules, what are the opportunities and risks for them? Qing again, maybe?
Lady first, this is the rule we apply now. Well, I think speaking for the Paris Agreement or any of the climate actions, I think it definitely further accelerates our green transformation. I think from actually three perspectives. One is the energy supply side, you know, how we can really use more clean energy and non-fossil energy. The second is the energy demand side. So what is the, you know, how we really electrificate or electrification used to be boosted in both manufacturing and daily life. Secondly, industry transformation from high energy consumption to more and emissions to more lower consumption emissions, or even use more cleaner energies. Then the third perspective is really make the supply and demand side connected. So the connectivity between the supply and demand. So it is all about smart energy management and electrification, electricity market transition. So if company are not adapting to this change, or not adapting to, you know, from the own operations, but also your business models to this transition, I think it will be a great risk in the future. So, well, you know, not even talk about all the opportunities, growth opportunities raised from this with these challenges, which will become really company competitive advantage if above leverage and capture the opportunity that we can. Always the question is how, right? So, you know, I just want to, you know, echo what recently our CEO, Siemens China CEO, Dr. Xiao, used a very short Chinese expression. I don't even know how to, whether, you know, right English expression. We call it 一点一杠双循环. So actually, it's take industrial decarbonization as the pivot. So 产业低碳化. So start with the area that you know, with the highest return on investment, and then extend to the entire value chain, entire life cycle. So it can be a green product designs or a low carbon supply chains, for example. And the second one is the take low carbon industrialization as a lever. So we call it 低碳产业化. So use our own technology and experiences to empower ecosystem partners so that we can go together green. So that is our zero carbon pioneer initiative is all about. The last one is the gang. So双循环 is the decarbonization and digitalization as the dual drivers of the whole development. In Siemens, we use, you know, probably know it, digital twin makes it possible to reduce carbon footprint along the full life cycle, starting with the design phase. Then we call it industry metaverse. So through the data and analytics, digital twin enables energy savings and efficient improvements.
Great. So like you said, smart energy management, market mechanism, you know, low carbon decarbonization in the industries. Those are the great, and also, as you said, there will be risks if you are not complying on these new standards. Professor Chen, please, the same question.
Yeah, I think there are three pillars for companies to rely on to do ESG well. The first one is to prioritize social responsibilities. Well, there are many challenges, and so not obviously a company cannot do everything well. So it really has to prioritize what are the social responsibilities it has to address. So that's the first. The second pillar is the technological innovation. And without technology, it cannot solve problems efficiently. So that is equally important. But finally, it's also important is that we call it a stakeholder ecosystem, or we can call this market mechanism. And because unless you prioritize social responsibility as the important mission, because only you fully leverage on the technological innovation and you engage all stakeholders, otherwise it's impossible to solve the social challenges in a systematic and scalable way. So I think that's the first what business can do, to rely on three pillars. And we also, at Alibaba, we're also trying to advocate a so-called 5-step approach from a strategy point of view. The first is, just as I mentioned, is to position and to target. And so you're going to have to set up your ESG goals based on your engagement with the stakeholders. You understand what the society needs. The second is to integrate ESG into your business design. ESG is not additional burden. ESG is not that you do charity work. ESG is your own main business. Okay, it has to integrate that into this. ESG is the CEO mission. Now that's second part. The third then is to promote coordinated transformation of the related business ecosystems. It's not only yourself, you have to work with your partners, your value chains, do everything you can. The fourth is to amplify impacts through the technology. And this we especially have a sense as a platform company to amplify impacts through platforms. And finally, we also advocate to promote charity for sustainability. Well, charity can do a lot of things, but one thing in this age, you can actually channel this into as part of the work to promote sustainability beyond just business. So all those 5 steps together, we think can help companies to position themselves to do well.
Yeah, great. So just like Professor Chen said, there are not only businesses, but also governments, investors, individuals. So how all these stakeholders prepare, adapt, and develop, develop for the changes. For example, how to apply ESG to form corporate strategies, investment decisions, portfolio build up, and monitor risks. How? So, Qing again, maybe.
Well, I fully agree what Mr. Chen Long mentioned, that it's not just one company, it's an entire society, and also in the business, it's also about how you really mobilize your business ecosystem. But speaking from the whole mechanism or the systematics, and I think government firstly has also quite a lot of roles to play. The China, as I said before, that China contributes about 30% of global carbon emissions, and is still growing annual emission rate. So and we have very challenging goals that the government set to realize 30-60 goals. So we have also witnessed the many challenges in the last 2 years. But we also see how the government is really taking active role and move actively and release a series of policies and drive decarbonization forward. So from this direction, I think as a company in the business, we are also looking forward to have more guidance, more collective measures, and together with government and together with our ecosystems, and as Siemens in our industry space, we also take our know-hows and innovation technology support decarbonization goals. That's more for the government perspective, but also for the companies everyone, including us Siemens, I think we need to build sustainability as a core in the structure in your business. You hear this from Mr. Chen. Really, sustainability is not something in addition or something nice to have. It is fundamental in your business. And in Siemens, we make sustainability as a business, and sustainability as a business is our fundamental business logic to systematically integrate both sustainability-related business opportunities and risk into our decisions, strategies, portfolios, our processes, and our systems, and even people management. So entire, you can call it entire PLM, CRM, SEM, that in every single processes and activities, sustainability is integrated. And sustainability is also a mindset. You hear the same just now. So it's not one company, it's also not the management. It's for every employees that they also integrated into their daily work. So company can develop really activities to engage and reward the behaviors of our own people, but also our ecosystem. I also want to echo, Chenlong said, and I learned Ali had a lot of activity in these areas. I only know Ali Ant Forest, Mayi Senling, right? It's one of the good examples of using digital technology to scale up climate actions, and of course that we believe more people involved and more support, the more sustainability our world can be. And I'm really looking forward to have more learnings from many of the players and from all these collaborations to share, to exchange, and explore and develop our actions and tackle all these ESG challenges. So the whole ecosystem, as mentioned before.
Yes, government, companies like you, from you both, and also people, employees, ecosystems. Professor Chen, please.
Yeah, so for the major social challenges such as the climate change and the inequality is really beyond any individual institution, individual, or even a country to handle. So really, we have to team up, to do this. Everybody should try what they can, every stakeholder. Now here, I think there's a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach. So it's great for the government to set up the guidelines, to make the efforts, to coordinate resources, to deal with that. But equally important is a bottom-up approach, because unless the majority of the companies, the employees, who are also the consumers, if they actually are aware of and they can participate in this process, it's impossible to deal with the problem. So companies, I think, can do a lot with this bottom-up approach. Now let's talk about the environmental climate change. Here, if we look at how we define the carbon emissions, we have the scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. Scope 1, it refers to your company's own operations, and scope 2 refers to when you use, for example, electricity. If that electricity was produced without clean energy, then that's a problem. That increase the carbon emission. And also the scope 3 involves the carbon emission because you use products from your value chains from other companies. Now, if you look at this carefully, you can see that they overlap with each other. Because let's say I'm using the electricity from another company, but that electricity is not produced from the clean energy. But then that carbon emission is scope 1 from the electricity production company. So you can see that, and my value chain's carbon emission is actually scope 1 or 2 from other companies. You can see that actually, so those definitions are actually overlapping. So the question then is, why do you count them, double counting them or triple counting them? I think the basic principle is, I call this the impact principle. Every company should try all they can. Whatever impact they can effect, on themselves, on their partners, on the value chains, and on the consumers. Anything you can to help, And based on that, I can give you one example of what Alibaba does. Besides that, we commit the scope 1, 2, and 3, our own neutrality plans. I think we created a concept that's called scope 3+. That is we are going to help try to impact the companies and individuals on the platforms. They're not our scope 1 or 2 or 3, but we feel that we can have some impact on them, change consumers' behavior, help the companies on the platform to reduce carbon emission. And that really excites us if we can help the tens of millions of SMEs, more than 1 billion consumers to change their behavior, help them, enable them to do something, then that is really beyond scope 1, 2, 3, or 3, but this is our responsibility. I'm just giving a sense to see how companies should try all it can, and it also excites our employees, everybody involved. We think this is something so meaningful to us. And just now, Ms. Ma just mentioned Ant Forest. Actually, back in 2016, actually, I still remember Ant Forest was created in my office. So I had a good memory of how that took place. And at that time, now it's becomes more urgent. So we feel there's a lot more we can do.
Yeah, so top-down approach and bottom-up. Top-down approach by regulation, rules, and laws, and bottom-up by companies themselves, consumers themselves. So I wonder, on the platforms you were talking about on Alibaba, are you enforcing these rules or making those mandatory?
Well, you can, I think probably both. And so just now I mentioned that one of the main pillars of the to do ESG well is that we call this the stakeholder ecosystem. And I think that companies are best at, because as the marketplace player, they know how to engage other people through their products, from services, a lot of things. So here, I think we can actually help. One good example is to build, let's say, a green product market. Obviously, and so that helps the producers, to find their demand. On the other hand, it finds the consumers who are particularly aware, who really want to enjoy green products, to find the sellers, producers. So you can see that unless you build such a bridge, then it's very hard for them separately to do anything. And so that's a very good example of, it's not really enforcing anything. You are really building a mechanism to make things happen. But some of the things, you make them as a requirement. You restrict things. You promote. You help the green products have a premium. We actually aligned with a lot of brands. Now, in this year we came up with a host of the top consumer brands to have this green friendly action alliance. Which promotes things, and we really promote for all the products, starting from their design, then to the final usage. And so we promote all those things. We promote practice of the green logistic. We promote the marketing, all those things to help change consumers' mindset to do things. So a lot of things we can do. And I think the consumers love this. Not everybody will accept this beginning, but I think this that probably give a gist of it.
Yeah, that echoes to Qing's actually earlier comments about supply and demand alliance, right, through the market mechanisms. But another question is, one of the challenges for ESG, as some believe, is lack of unified standards, rating metrics, etc. in each of the three letters and all of them. Elon Musk just now, I think recently he was not happy after Tesla was removed from the S&P ESG list. So then what should be done, to end the debate or the controversies, to make ESG not a nice thing to have, just as Ting said, but a convincing, solid, invincible strategy. Maybe we start with Chen this time, Chenlong this time.
Okay, you caught me on guard. So I think it's true that there's no uniform standard. There's still controversy on the standards, but I think for the companies who care about the social responsibilities, they see this as a great mechanism or channel, and to essentially for every company to grow, to have sustainability, it has to take into a consideration of its stakeholders' interest. But then it's very difficult to have a mechanism that they can actually measure their contribution and they can actually continuously communicate with stakeholders. And I think that's the gist of the ESG. That's the best part of it. That is, we can continuously tell the society what we have done and how we plan to do things, and let the society to be our allies, to monitor us, to be to try to be a good company. And so that's the gist of it. And regardless of the standards, I think this is a great mechanism for us to do. Now, I think we really should support this. But that being said, we agree that there should be more integrated consideration of the what is ESG standards, what's the nature of ESG, what is ESG spirit, and so how we should use that to communicate. Let me give you a couple of examples. One is that obviously we shouldn't use ESG as the so-called greenwashing. It's some companies that just think that, wow, this is an opportunity to branding my company and beyond what you actually do. You really should commit it. This should become your long-term strategy. If you believe sustainability is the long-term strategy for a company, then that should become a core spirit of it. So you should believe it. And so I think the essence of ESG is really integrate that into your mission and position well, do well, measure well, and communicate well. So that's the sequence of things. So we shouldn't do that as just as the so-called PR or just that's bad. Another side is also bad is that it's just that it's almost like fundamentalism. It's just think from your own point of view to think about, wow, I do some country or some sector or some company do well, others do not, because the whole economy is the so-called the circular economy. So they actually contribute differently and so inevitably some of them will have higher carbon emission, some industries than some others. That does not mean they commit a sin. Let's think about the consumers in the advanced countries. Actually, they consume a lot of products that when they were produced, there will be carbon emission. So is that the sin of the consumer or is it the producer? I would think it's both, right? So that's from countries' point of view. We have to think about the emerging markets, developing countries. They have their own dilemma, the challenges. We have to help each other to solve the problem. And similarly, in the industries, for companies, some industries they emit the carbon more, some much less, because that's the nature of the industry. That doesn't make the ones that emit less better. What we really need to think about is that from their starting point, what is their commitment? Have they tried their best? And are they doing effectively? This is really the yardstick. I'm giving you a couple of examples to show that it's not surprising that the standard is not still converging yet. But I think I really endorse this ESG because this is really for companies to do well and to communicate with the society, to build trust. And that's the gist of it.
do it well, communicate it well, educate the society, improve the standards, they will converge. But along the sides, it's not about the standards. It's about what you do. It's about how do you achieve ESG. Ms. Ma, anything to add?
Well, I may have a little different opinions. No, similar but different form. I think sustainability is a global topic. I think this is the only few remaining topics that no one disagree. That because the world is so separated, divided now.
Yes.
But this is the only topic that this need entire global efforts and joint force. And I think that because it also involves really a various of stakeholders. So we need to make guidance standards even more, become more, having a guidance and standards. I think it's very important that serve a common languages for all the stakeholders to agree upon and as a joint direction to strive. But coming to what we can do as individuals, Alibaba already mentioned many, in the industrial world, like Siemens, our level at the company level, we also mentioned the whole sustainability. The key is technology, is innovation. So our technology, one example, the Sea Green, I don't know if you know this product. So it is a product that we build up a trusted ecosystem, enhance carbon footprint, transparency via blockchain, because the technology blockchain, you can't really change. So then also, via the cybersecurity technology. And in this way, we can make ESG really convincing, solid, and invisible. That's what you said. So, the technology can help a lot. But again, it's a joint force. It's a game of the team. Yes.
Very quickly, we've seen the geopolitics, the war in Europe, and this year, as both mentioned, as Jing mentioned, sometimes the disruptions in new energy output, right, from the drought. So there seems always a thing or a disruption or a sudden immediate emergency that slows down our carbon reduction, progress. How can we, set the long-term view without, always setting back? Yeah, just maybe just one or two sentences before closing. Ms. Ma.
Well, I think it won't really impact the importance of sustainability in the long run. And I think even more imperative, because it is clearly a topic that no one can disagree, as I said, right? As a global challenges we are facing, and we can only take joint action and collaborate globally. And I like very much, what Beijing Expo today is doing, really turn challenges into opportunity, and with all the stakeholders around the world, that we can really explore business opportunity and collaboratively to see how can we promote technology for good for the society. So it is really a mindset. It's a long-term, mindset. We have the technology with purpose as one of our core key strategic priorities. So, that's our response. That is the, technology with the purpose. What is the purpose? That is the purpose. The entire ESG is our purpose. So, so that's we will continue to strive.
Yeah. Chen.
Oh, yes. So all this crisis, it just reminds us how it indeed imperative that our efforts should be, and why sustainability is really a key issue that each individual companies should do, and that unites the whole society as a whole globally, and that we have no choice. But on the other hand, every company, they were born because of opportunities. Challenges means opportunities, because there's needs for solving the problems. So it is our obligation. It's also our great opportunity to leverage on the strengths of technological innovation to put the society challenges as a priority for the task for us to deal with, and to engage all the possible participants to solve the problems. That's the way ahead.
Yeah. We still have 1 minute to go, but one last question for both of you. What's on your top of your wish list for ESG development, or the one or the key message you want to send to our audience? Just very quickly, 1 to 2 sentences. Ting, please.
Well, I repeatedly say that ESG should be and has to be the fundamental business rationale. And we can, the industry digitalization, innovation, and ecosystem, eco-partnership will be the engine to drive sustainability development. Again, it is a team game.
Yeah, great team game. Yeah, Professor Chen.
Yeah, so back in 1999, Alibaba was born, and at that time, we made the commitment we want Alibaba to live for at least 102 years, which means it will cover 3 centuries. We want to be a 100-year-old company. And recently, in our ESG reports, our CEO, our chairman CEO, Daniel, made it clear that ESG is the bridge to carry us over there. So ESG is the essence. It's really represents the long-term corporate spirit. It is the bridge to carry us, and that just shows how committed we are, and that is our priority. We want to make this into the actual strategy and implementable, and we want to see more results.
Yeah, with that, thank you so much, both speakers. We had an excellent discussion. Thank you again, Ms. Ma and Professor Chen, and see you next time. And thank you for our audience. Bye.
Thank
you.
you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah.
中国建筑国际集团于1979年在香港成立，现已构建起了集科技、投资、建筑、资产运营于一体的全产业链业务模式。中国建筑国际集团成立40多年来，先后承建了全球各地1000多项工程，以科技创新引领企业发展。项目获得多项国家科技进步奖、詹天佑奖、鲁班奖、华夏奖、香港 QBA、澳大利亚 AIB、英国 NCE 等多项国内外奖项，拥有国家高新技术企业5家。匠心铸造，力争真品。中国建筑国际集团持续发挥建造精品工程的核心专长，打造经典力作，拓展幸福空间，创建美好城市未来。中国建筑国际集团积极响应国家科技发展战略，坚持贯彻中建集团“1创5强”战略部署和166战略举措，制定中国建筑国际集团科技创新发展规划，建立由中国工程院院士和行业权威专家组成的专家委员会，为公司的科技发展战略提供决策咨询，促进公司科技创新工作。中国建筑国际集团重视科技创新，设立科技发展基金，推动核心科技研发和先进技术推广。公司以自主研发为主导，加强创新平台建设，成立中国建筑国际集团建筑科技研究院，下设7大研究中心。1、装配式建筑研究中心，拥有设计、制造、施工、材料等全产业链专业团队，着力攻关装配式建筑关键技术与产品。2、智能幕墙研究中心，拥有全球技术能力一流的专业团队，率先攻克幕墙行业全球性技术难题，研发 BIPV 等新一代幕墙产品。3、医疗建筑研究中心，开展国际标准现代化医院成套建造技术研究和模块化医院建造核心技术研发。4、酒店建筑研究中心，专注研发国际标准现代化大型酒店建造关键技术。5、基础设施工程技术研究中心， 致力于攻关复杂地质隧道工程、海底沉管隧道工程、高速公路建造养护、大型环保设施建设等核心建造技术。6、建筑信息模型研究中心，专攻基于 BIM 的全过程集成应用研究。7、智慧建造研究中心，自主研发 C-Smart 智慧工地系列产品，打造具有自主知识产权的数字化建造集成管理平台。中国建筑国际集团在核心技术领域开展科技攻关，不惧挑战，奋勇前行，总结提炼出6大核心关键技术。1、模块化集成建筑关键技术，率先引领装配式建筑由构建单元向新一代模块化集成建筑方向发展，研发了海龙魔方系列建筑产品，包括混凝土 MIC、钢结构 MIC、电梯 MIC， 建成行业领先的智能化生产线，形成 MIC 快速建造技术体系，应用于医院、学校、酒店、办公楼、展厅等多个领域，引领新型建筑工业化发展。2、复杂玻璃幕墙制造与施工关键技术，拥有超50年幕墙工程经验，掌握复杂幕墙参数化设计技术，打造全球领先的智能化生产线，实现幕墙科技多项全球首创和行业第一，承建世界第一高楼迪拜哈利法塔，最复杂幕墙工程香港美利道大厦和亚洲区苹果店高端幕墙。3、国际标准医院设计建造关键技术，掌握基于国际标准的现代化医院设计建造技术，参与建设香港1/4医院工程、澳门1/2医院工程。在香港疫情爆发时，通过自主研发 MIC 负压隔离病房等系列模块化医疗设施产品，助力疫情防控阻击战。4、复杂环境隧道建造关键技术，研发城市隧道穿越、高耐久抗震沉管海底隧道设计施工、高速公路隧道建造养护等各类关键技术。5、国际标准酒店建造关键技术，掌握国际标准高档酒店建造关键技术，打造了一系列国际一流标准的大型酒店，以科技铸就精品工程。6、环保项目建造与运营关键技术，攻关海水化淡、有机资源回收、污水处理等多种类型环保项目设计建造成套技术，助力绿色低碳发展。科技赋能，创新引领。中国建筑国际集团坚持以更高站位谋划科技创新，以科技创新引领高质量发展，深入推动实施创新驱动发展战略，乘风破浪，领潮前行，为中建集团创建世界一流企业贡献中海力量。慎微笃行，精筑致远。中国建筑国际集团。